Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thread to Threshold. I'm your host, Phil Rice, and on this lovely 4th of July weekend in 2020, I have the wonderful, very cool, amazing, awesome, in other words of that ilk, Dr. Robin Kelly. Dr. Robin is a speaker, author. Well, hang on, better turn that off. Okay, Robin is an English-trained doctor whose medical practice has evolved to embrace Eastern and modern mind-body philosophies. Gee whiz, I'm getting all the feedback. His focus is on integrating these holistic models into a modern contemporary environment, blending the best of the West with the best of the East. Patients are seen as true partners, and healing plans are devised honoring each person's unique gifts. According to Robin, the most common ingredient missing from modern prescriptions is the very soul of the individual seeking help. Now, Robin has this about page is pretty lengthy, guys. So I suggest you go and check it out. I've put a post up about that, and I'll put a comment in the description so you can go and check it out because he has a very long resume. There's so much more to this man than just being a medical practitioner, and that includes being a musician and an author and a speaker and presenter. And if you're connected with him on any of the social media that he's on, you'll notice that he's very active with things like music and creating things in a very humorous kind of way. And I've been looking forward to this interaction for a while. So thank you, Robin, for coming and joining us on the show here. I'm very grateful for having you.
Oh, look, thank you, Phil. I'm going to enjoy this, and congratulations for starting this up, particularly in Auckland. There's a great need, and yeah, I'm very impressed with what you've done already.
Oh, that's such wonderful, gracious feedback, because I really am sort of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of stumbling forward with this thing, and I've had lots of great feedback, and people like it, I think, because, people who know me are being exposed to conversations that they may not have otherwise sort of had a chance to, or just haven't had it put in front of them. So, I've managed to connect with some wonderful people, and like yourself, and so, I guess. We were having an interesting discussion off air, but I also said to you, like, I know we've got limited time, so I want to just go into anything like being a medical practitioner and in these times that we're in. I'd love to get your commentary on anything that you think is extremely pertinent right now on anything, and please, by all means, just go for it.
Oh, thank you, Phil. Yeah, the medical practitioner bit. I'd have to say the lockdown was very interesting for me. I was working in the mornings. We were on the phone. We were doing teleconsultations, and for me, it was like a retreat as well, because by the end of, rather than working full days, I was working half days, and we'd go on walks and discover places near our home, which we'd never seen before. Just wonderful, wonderful bushwalks, because often when you're working, we walk a dog, but it takes, we usually say, look, it will be half an hour to 3/4 of an hour, because that's all we can fit in. Once you've got 2 hours, you can really have a wonderful walk in the woods, meditative walk, fun walk. You can take the time pressure away. So as a personal, my personal, I look back at it personally and rather selfishly as a time that I enjoyed. However, it was also the strangest time that I've ever been a doctor in. I qualified 45 years ago, believe it or not. And so I've seen a lot. I've gone through a lot. And this was easily the most, well, it still is the most interesting, trying, difficult time. And we're now seeing, now I'm busier than ever, because we're seeing stuff that I haven't seen since the 70s, advanced pathology from people who have been reticent about coming to see the doctors, particularly old people. They may have been reticent because they didn't want to catch COVID-19, but they're also being kind and thought, well, I don't want to bother them about my breathlessness or swollen ankle. So I'm seeing people in heart failure that, at a degree I've never seen before. I was talking to a child cancer nurse the other day, and she said there was no child cancer diagnosed in the lockdown. Now, that could sound good, but of course it isn't, because there's a rush now. Things are and it's quite interesting. It's almost like a control, because you wondered, I really did wonder often if I was doing much good with my preventative medicine or trying to get in early and talk. And it looks like we probably do. I have some, my past history includes lots of things, including being a hospice director on the North Shore for a number of years in the 90s when the hospice was being developed. It was still really home-based. So I've signed lots and lots of death certificates in my life. And I was talking to some other colleagues, and I've never put flu down as a cause of death. When somebody gets old and develops a terminal illness, we used to put the first cause of death as being pneumonia or bronchopneumonia, and then you put the cancer of the lung, then you may put the heart failure. In the 80s, I stopped doing that, actually put what I thought was the principal cause, which would have been the cancer. I mean, dying, we can talk about dying. Dying, we don't really understand. We're looking at it very linearly, but there's much more going on. And you know, my belief is that we haven't, well, certainly it hasn't been proved that our consciousness dies when we die. So that's a pretty important focus for us as well, which is and I think most people who have done hospice work feel very honored that they are with people in the family at an amazingly pertinent time in their lives. Anyway, so I changed that from putting that as the primary cause, the respiratory illness as the primary cause, and looked beyond that to the basis. Now, I do know that around the world that there's a huge difference in how you sign death certificates. I mean, and how we actually approach death. We had a doctor who came from Yugoslavia or from Bosnia, and she said you had to pronounce death, you had to put an ECG on people to prove it in their country. This is just how different it is around the world. So I think we have to look at the figures with that eye of what we call comorbidities and other things that are happening in people's lives. And to be honest, I was looking at the internet this morning, and this is the very thing that the officials in Ireland are saying. They're about the first country that's come out and saying, well, wait a minute, most people who died, we have to look at excess mortality over a certain time, and they were older, and we have to be more scientific and succinct about this. So that's what I'm feeling. I'm thinking that as we come out of this, we're going to look back and look at some of the estimates and overestimates that we've had, and they're very pertinent about how we're going to manage these things in future, because these viruses mutate, and there's another one, always another one there in the corner. We should be looking at that with some knowledge, not fear, because I think that when you go into the media, they are invested in fear, and our news is invested in fear, and in a pernicious way, I think. So we have to be far better than that, and we have to use all the media, the social media, and we have to be very selective to get an understanding of this. It's certainly taken me 3 months to get an understanding. I haven't talked much about it because it's so complicated. And I have a responsibility to people, ultimately, to tell my truth. And I didn't, and early on, like all of us, we didn't know what we were getting into. And the politicians didn't know either. So when we went into lockdown, that was, I think, a state of people not knowing what was happening, particularly politicians who haven't had any healing or interactions in their lives professionally, I'm not saying in their lives there. So I could understand why they were saying, well, let's be safe. Let's enact the precautionary principle. But I think we've learned from this, and we've also said, what is the cost of that? What's the cost of people's lives? And although you and I may have benefited from this retreat into a deeper, almost a meditative retreat, there may be many others that have lost their jobs, lost their rented homes, and I think more is to come that will have a huge impact on their lives for a long time. And it's sort of up to us, I suppose, as health professionals, to help them through this.
Yeah, there's absolutely a change that's happened, I think, in the collective psychology of the world. When everyone's operating in a certain way, and I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that everybody, because there are those that will seek and research, and those that will just be happy with the information that they're being provided with through the mainstream media and through normal sources and that. But I felt it. When you kind of, I remember going for a walk on the second or third day, and people like 50 meters in front of me are crossing the road. They don't want to come anywhere near, and it's like going, man, how many days does it take to build a habit of like perceiving every other person as a potential threat, and and drilling that kind of thing in over a period of time. And so, but I think that we've had some time, and people are researching the effectiveness of things like masks and hand sanitizer, social distancing, and those things, and going, what is effective and what's not, and how does that actually affect us psychologically, and because there are costs to these measures, and I mean, I'm fully aware of some of the trauma that people are going through with losing their jobs, and losing their incomes, and having, some people are, their job is where they get their sense of self-worth, their self-value from, and so they don't have something to do, and they like working in a team of people, and over a long period of time that can become a little bit detrimental to their like an existential threat, almost like, well, an existential sort of like problem. It's problematic because they don't have that group environment that they're so used to, and it's almost like this forced kind of like, I was saying early on, we're literally all being forced to go inside, literally and metaphorically, and this is a chance for things to be worked out. And where we are here in New Zealand obviously is a lot different to the rest of the world. It seems like the planet's kind of, I mean, if you watch the news, it looks like the place is going nuts, but here in New Zealand it's not so much, because we are, we've kind of come out of the lockdown situation, and we're all, I don't know, like things seem to be returning to some level of normalcy. But I mean, for people who don't have work, or they're having to change their jobs or find other things or ask for help, it's changed, people, and I guess it's maybe given them another level of understanding of themselves and how they perceive themselves, because obviously a workplace and a group environment can be quite distracting from their own personal lives as well.
Yeah, and we are all addicted to thinking and doing, and that's why we're here in this world. I think to be of service, to do stuff. That's why we've got this physical form. It's the ideal to meet people, to interact with people, and I believe do good, and that from my writings, that in my understanding feeds into a greater consciousness. It feeds into a soup of goodness, which we can call godness, which is then we all observe. But in the same instance, we have still have a lot of emptiness in ourselves that we need to fill. And there are certain things that fill this hole. Some people talk about the hole in the donut, and other things that seem to go right through this hole, and they're called the addictions, because we put them like
I like that.
And we overthink, and we consume, and we maybe drink, and we smoke, and we do all this, and all of this goes through. And of course, this is great for those people selling all that stuff, because we're never satisfied. We always want a bigger car and a bigger house. And our thinking and overthinking can block off some deeper feelings, this emptiness of the soul. And it's worth reflecting on that. And I think a lot of us have in this lockdown. To get to that point, though, there's catharsis, there's triggers, there's all the sort of things you get when you detox. So there's going through a detox. And for a lot of people, it's too much. And therefore, you can see them rushing back to their McDonald's. They see that, gosh, at last I can have a McDonald's. It's not logical, because no effective addictions aren't. But for the rest of us, yes, I think there'll be a number who will have moved in this direction, and then they go from their busyness into a void, and they're coming to me and say, how do I fill this emptiness. This is the, rather than fill it with the fear that's been given, that seems to be in around here. How am I going to fill this with something meaningful? We talked before about what can fill it, and of course, you know, without. Yeah, I mean, to go to the nitty gritty, it's love that can fill it, actually. And I don't mean just romantic love, some deep compassion for the planet, for yourself, particularly for yourself, which you can share with others. But, you know, creativity and music and somehow goes a long way to this as well. I'm saying music and dance. It's anything that's a reflection of our true energy, and that's really honest, speaking our truth, like you're doing, fills this. Even though there may not be lots of people wanting to listen, that doesn't matter. They may tell others, and it can spread organically. So that's the way I see this time for us.
Yeah, that's really lovely put. And you're right. You know, I think what happens is that this has been such a great opportunity for people to start. You know, the noise has been cut off in a sense. A lot of the noise, the static, has been removed, and we've had time to reflect and go into contemplation and start thinking about what's really important to us, what's really meaningful. And I mean, you know, this has been my adventure for the last 6-7 years of, like, you know, trying to find something that, you know, means more to me. And I have to say that what I've discovered for myself is that it really does start with each one of us. Well, that's my view anyway. It starts, you know, turning from living from the outside in, from the inside out. And this thing about self-care, I mean, you know, getting off coffee and getting off, you know, I wasn't really an alcoholic or anything like that, but I did drink a lot because that's just what everyone else did. But smoking, you know, and food as well. I mean, that's probably the last big one for me, is just like, you know, I love eating, but, you know, not overeating, but, you know, recognizing these masters in my life or in our lives that we can take our power back from, because, you know, we can develop willpower that we can apply into other areas of our lives. And we've suddenly got this new storehouse or capacity for energy that we can apply to other areas, like creativity, which is, you know, in my view, you know, I think it's important to not sit on the fence with your worldview as far as like what happens after death. I think it's good to be open-minded, but, you know, I said this on a couple of other podcasts, is that if you take the worldview that you're an immortal soul, it takes a lot of the pressure off, because you're not in a hurry to try and get so much done in your 80+ years that you've got here, if you get endowed with that much. But also, you know, if there is more going on, if you do the research, oh my gosh, the overwhelming amount of information regarding human potential and capability beyond the 5 senses, or the ostensible 5 senses, is quite overwhelming. And, you know, and I find that really exciting, and that's the kind of stuff I really love talking about, because for me that stimulates imagination. And I think that's the greatest gift that we've got, in a sense, is that, you know, if we take on the view that there is a creator of some sort, that we have, you know, that we are the creation of a creator, then in my view, it's like, well, we can honor that by being creators ourselves, and continuing the process. And you know, I guess for me, we were talking off air before about my own adventure, you know, just like completely, you know, losing interest in being a musician. And you know, I found other ways to be creative, which has been great, because it's forced me to be creative in other ways, whether it's been through writing, you know, and also, you know, I've taken an interest in art as well. I did an imagination course that I found online just for, you know, shits and giggles, and it was extremely liberating, you know. Like I didn't think I could draw, but here's the thing: you don't need to draw, you don't need to paint. You just pick up the damn brush and you just do it. And then, you know, I did this thing where I do like 10 paintings a day of like just black, you know, just a black paintbrush and an easel. I built an easel, and you know, I did this whole process, and then I absorbed myself in it. And every day I would do these 10 paintings, and I'm not trying to paint anything specifically. I'm just seeing where the brush goes, and then suddenly and it's like when I would sit down with the guitar, you know, I'd play all the usual suspects, all my usual old licks and riffs and all the rest of it. And then I'd be like, I'm forced to come up with something new and different here. And I found that with the painting, and it was like it was stretching the creativity muscle in a slightly different way. And I found that muscle, it is good to stretch it in different ways, not just, you know, like stretching it one way is fine, but when you start stretching it all these different ways, it becomes bigger, I think. Or, you know, I'm using pretty loose kind of terms here, but I found that to be of great value for myself, just by trying things, because I didn't really let myself try these other things because I was thinking, well, where's it going? What's the purpose? Because people say, why are you doing what you're doing, Phil? What's the purpose of doing it? And I'm like going, well, I don't really know, but it just seems like a good idea.
It is a good idea, and to create, you've got to get out of the way. This is, I mean, it's a bit of a leap going into artificial intelligence. This is what this differentiates our creativity from the creativity of a computer, which is what we put into it that comes out of it. And you will know that if you create, you get out of the way. You often songs, creations come to us when we're asleep or in that twilight zone. We wake up with this fully fledged thing. We've got out of the way. We know this from brainwaves and getting into alpha and theta consciousness. You know, you get out of it. You don't let your thoughts get in the way, and the creation comes through, and you allow it to come through. And for some people it's art, others it will be music, others it's a sort of a mixture of all that. And so it's the opposite of computing. It's opposite of when we talk about artificial intelligence, with all that sort of digital noughts and ones and the trillions and trillions of those all coming to a conclusion. We're actually getting rid of that and allowing something else to come through. And that's what I understand about creativity. And it makes me feel that we are a portal for this when we get it right. And in fact, if we go into a retreat, although we often go through a catharsis as old stuff comes up and the shit hits the fan, really, at the same stage, we are in a state eventually when we download this creativity. And when you do that, you know, like when you're painting or when you're doing that, you don't get precious about it because you know it's just come through you. It's almost like your ego isn't invested into it. This is the same as healing. You have to be there and you're part of it, the process. But if somebody says, oh, I don't like that or whatever, well, it came through me, you know, I don't own it. I'm part of the process. And that's what I find anyway now. And that for my understanding, it's almost, and the drive is that we have to get clever and clever on a deductive way, ignoring what I'm talking about, which is soul, which is what comes through us, our feelings. We feel first and then we do stuff. We'd have to do stuff. We have to rationalize. We then, like when you're painting, you've got your brush and you're developing probably a technique that requires a certain amount of discipline. It can be just splashing on, I don't know. But once this comes through us, we say, well, how are we going to get that on the canvas? And then, you know, when do I finish it? All this sort of thing. So we need our rational brain as well as our feeling part, our energetic feeling part. But it's that portal, and it's the most brilliant thing in life because it's almost easy. It's like, oh, I've just got out of the way and this has happened. I can't remember how it happened, but something has sort of cleansed me as it's come through. I don't know, but it's not difficult, and that's been our conditioning, that life is difficult, life is fearful, life isn't joyful, and we're hearing that, you know, we're hearing this negativity about, God, we're going to die, and so we've got to do something about it. I think what we're seeing, I was just thinking this the other day about this whole COVID-19 thing, is that we as humans we have to be in charge. We have to, our ego has to control something that's coming along. We are sort of flesh and blood. We're animals, but we're amazing animals, but we are animals, and we can't control and get everything that comes in. We have to embrace it. We have to realize that if a certain number of us die, then that is the way that organic processes happen. You know, the deciduous trees drop their leaves and nurture the ground, and therefore there's this wonderful growth in the forest. And you know, we have to realize we're part of that. It's not the end of the world. It's maybe not the end of our world when we die. We don't know, but that's not. And so once we get rid of fear, we can start creating a lot more, like you say, because the fear blocks us, and blocks the creativity. It has to be done with a sense of some relish and joy, and yeah. I saw a video of I think Picasso painting, and it's just amazing, because to begin with it looked like a complete utter mess, and then there was a point where it just turned into a masterpiece, as far as I could see. Not everybody likes Picasso, but I there was just something like, well, what was that? And it was just it's on YouTube, I think, just Picasso painting. I think they sped it up and everything. It's just something that happened. You think, oh wow. And that's what happens with creativity, and everybody has something in them that can happen.
Yeah, I think about when it's almost like a state of mind you get into, and you've kind of got to keep working it. And like I said, I came across this really great imagination course hosted by a chap by the name of John Rappaport. And if you've heard of him.
Yeah, I've heard of John. Yeah.
And I have reached out to John, just for the listeners and watchers, to see if he'll do an interview with me on imagination, but it's okay if he doesn't. He's a busy man. But the thing is that what you do is that, it's a state of mind you bring yourself into, and you start off doing seemingly meaningless, tedious things. And it's kind of like you're kind of quieting down that you should do this, you should do that kind of thing, those old programs and patterns. And you just do. You just do and do and do and do. And what that does is it almost kind of gets you into almost like a trance state or another state of mind. And then when I go back and I look at my paintings afterwards, it's like look back at old songs that I've written, and I go, wow, that, now that I'm looking at them with new eyes, I'm seeing other things. I'm seeing things, because I've gotten to studying symbolism and things like this, and learning how to see through different perspectives and that. And I have to say, I'm like, wow, did I do that? It's quite interesting. And I'm starting to see, like, you step back from the canvas and you tilt your head a little bit. And it's like, wow, I see something else that I didn't see before. And like, was that me? And I find that to be really intriguing, because it's like, I'm only using a black paint on a white back, but it's these shapes that start emerging and these images that start emerging. And I know there's people say, well, that's just this. People who say, well, that's just this. It's like, that's just placebo or something. I'm like going, you're kind of marginalizing something that's far more interesting than you kind of, what you're letting yourself onto. So yeah, I totally hear you, brother.
Well, you know what it is? It's magic. And not always just magic. And you thought, well, who says just magic? It is magic. It is magic, because it's also, people talk about being counterintuitive, and this always gets me, because really they're talking about counter-rational. Intuition isn't necessarily rational. It's coming out of left field. It might even come from the future. Who knows? We may be channeling the future, because often you'll find in your songs, you're talking about something you didn't know about that has proved later on an event that's happened later on. I've seen that, and it didn't, if you're honest, it didn't make sense at the time. What's that about? I don't know. And then 5 years later, oh, that was what it was about. It comes out, it's away from time and space. And it's the true magic. And there are black magicians around, certainly, but we are magicians in that way. That's when you get somebody who heals spontaneously against the odds. And people say, well, gosh, is that medicine or magic? And I said, well, what's wrong with it being magic? What's wrong with your life being magic? Because when you meet somebody and fall in love, is that magic? Oh no, that's just that's all very logical. No, it isn't. It's magic. And if you listen to, well, I'm mentioning music, and I know how you feel about, maybe when I listen to Pink Floyd, that to me is magic. When I listen to Bob Dylan's wordplay, that's magic. When I see a Picasso finishing, that's magic. When I talk to some people about this, and people who come to see me get this in some form, but if I'm talking in a general practice and approaching the subject, so often you hear somebody saying, oh, well, look, I'm not creative. This is maybe a wonderful woman who you're loving to be in her presence. But she said, well, all my kids are creative. You know, they play the saxophone and they're the web designers and design yachts. And I said, wait a minute, you were part of their creation. You were the vital part of the creation. How can you not be creative? Oh, you know, I can't sing. You hear all this stuff. Well, I can't do this. And
I've heard that plenty from the parents of the kids that I used to teach. And I'm like,
yeah,
I call bullshit on it, actually. I challenge them on it, you know.
You don't hear a 4-year-old say that.
No.
And a 4-year-old's, you know, usually they're having a laugh, aren't they? Because they like the magic, you know. They like you coming and doing something you're not expected to do. You know, like I put a stethoscope on my head, or, you know, put a mask. You know, if you're wearing a mask, I put it on my head. Sorry, I shouldn't say. But I always have. At least they can see you laughing. You know.
Yeah,
So you do the unexpected, which is the unexpected is creative. Because if you create something that everybody expects, it's no longer interesting, is it? You know, it has to be something that even surprises you. And if it surprises you, it's good. And if you've got all the answers to it, it's not that. It's probably not as magical as if you, yeah, how did this happen? If you ask you that, that's the magic of it. That's the joy. And that when you touch on that joy, that you don't need lots of money for that. You don't need to be a billionaire. In fact, I think probably being a billionaire blocks this, maybe. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's the rather. Maybe
it's almost like creation versus recreation. You know, someone painting a bowl of fruit, or copying a learning how, you know, and I'm not knocking it, because I mean, I've got some friends who are artists who, you know, they can do oil paintings and copy original ones, and they learn from the masters, whatever. But you know, but they'll spend, you know, hours, days and weeks, on perfecting this thing to look just like the original. And I'm like, well, that's cool, but that's not my bag, baby. I want to see what I can create that was not here before. You know, I want to see where my stream of consciousness will take me, rather than focusing on a thing. Because when I do that, you don't know what's going to come through, and that's an interesting thing too, because you know, I know that one conversation that you know, I've heard you speak about is the conversation of AI, and how you know, we can be, and this is my understanding, because I've done a bit of research on this too, is that, like, you know, we're predictable when we're operating from a place of wounding, and how when we are living our true purpose from our true will, you know, we're not, you know, the algorithm isn't going to know what we're going to do next, you know, and that's how we can, you know, sort of, you know, become the, what are we trying to say here? The individual, in a sense, because the unpredictable individual. And please share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. I've done some interviews on this, and I credit Thomas Sheridan, who's people should go to his YouTube. He's irreverent. He speaks his mind. He's Irish. You won't agree with everything he said. He's opinionated, but he's a hell of a lot of fun. And he's also a musician and a bard, and he termed this chaos magic. So I was always talking about magic, chaos magic. And it's actually a lot of fun, because one of the things is, you know, that the idea for AI is that we're tracked, that somehow our thoughts and deeds are assessed and processed and fed off. That's going to be the future. And if you're into the state of creativity and unpredictability, and I don't mean dangerously unpredictable, you know, you don't want anything that's going to be forcing people to run madly up the motorway the wrong way, or the right way, I suppose, then they won't get you. Because there's this thing called identity politics. So say you're on Facebook, they will assume that you are left-wing, right-wing, conspiracy theorists, you name it.
I want to pigeonhole you, basically.
Yeah. So do your best to be complex, to actually, because the computers can't work that out. The complexity of the human soul. It's the difference between digital and analog. And, you know, if you record your voice on an analog, what's happened is, if you record digitally, it somehow sanitizes your voice. It may make it more perfect, but it doesn't carry your soul, your past, your problems, or whatever. So it's not interesting. So I would. It's all right to have lots of contradictions in your life. You know, you can be somebody who isn't terribly competitive or whatever, but like watching the All Blacks. You can be somebody who likes to eat properly, but occasionally will have a McDonald's. You're a person who, and always, and that is the polymath. That's the unpredictable nature. It's actually what people, I think, if you fall in love with that part of the person that doesn't quite make sense all the time. Yeah. It's actually it's the part that you have to have a sense of humor about, you know. So you can play with this, and I think, you know, we're up against a big monster when it comes to these people who are controlling social media. So have a bit of fun. So if somebody comes in as a troll, I tend to put a laughing emoji on, because it's like, you can't be serious, sort of thing. And they'll look at this and say, oh, wait a minute, you know, is he laughing? I'm not trying to be funny here. Because I am saying, well, I'm laughing at that, because if I don't laugh at it, I'm going to get angry, and I'm not. You know, even start talking about tap dancing if you're not tap dancing. Just do something fun, all right? Because it will confuse the hell out of it. Before you know, you'll get lots of adverts for tap dancing shoes and things, you know. Which is very entertaining. You can form a little tap dancing club, which has nothing to do with tap dancing. Use a code. So somehow have some fun with it. But I'm actually being more serious with it. I don't think we can categorize ourselves in this sort of way. We are multi-loculated, multi-talented, and we've got lots of flaws. And if we don't have flaws, we don't have a sense of humor. There's no joy. There's no comedy, is there? If everybody's perfect. So that's the human soul, and it's contrary, and it's brilliant, and it's unpredictable, but it's also loving. That's everything. And AI is predictable, controlling, and I don't hear anything about love, because I don't know a computer that's had a heart.
What is it? There's a line from one of my other interviewees, was Dr. Richard Allen Miller, says, you know, a computer won't feel pleasure when it beats you at chess.
Yeah.
And that's quite, for me, is quite a good version in a nutshell. And when you talk about contradictions, I think of, you know, I love studying the ancient traditions of things. And one of my favorites is the tarot deck, because it's just, you know, it's blowing my mind open with the idea of symbolism. And it's a really great teaching tool, regardless of whether you want to use it for this or that, like to show people ideas and concepts and things like that. There's one card called the Art, or the Temperance card, which basically shows an angel mixing, you know, fire and water. And I think that's kind of where I am in my life at the moment. You know, like, I've got these parts of me that I'm trying to reconcile, but it's like trying to find balance in all things. It's almost like a futile effort. You can't, you know, you're looking for a straight, flat road, and that's just not life. You know, it's not interesting if there's no corners, where you don't know what's around the corner. Or if there's a hill and you get to the top of the hill and there's a beautiful vista to look across, or a barren wasteland, you just don't know. And that, I think, is part of the importance of a little bit of unpredictability in yourself. And of course, this is all done in a loving way. I mean, but you know, having these sort of I think being a little bit quirky and a little bit enigmatic is important, because it's what makes us human. Otherwise, we are literally turning into robots and androids, and that's like a real disservice to our gift of life that we've got here. And you know, I guess that's why I can't help being a goofball when it comes to, you know, when I hang out with my nieces and nephews and things like that, because they just bring it out in me. You know, I can't help it. It's just like, it just feels like the most natural thing ever.
Yeah. And you know, the sad thing is that we're seeing the world run by bureaucrats and technocrats. I don't see a lot of humor in that, and I mean, I'm a bit biased this way. I couldn't be a bureaucrat and be happy. I have to feel that I don't like being manipulated. I don't like half truths. I don't like being comfortable and just working till I retire and then get a retirement. I don't feel that is a life well lived. Now, that's for me. I'm not saying for them it might be where they're at and it's fine. And it may well be that they have other meanings in their lives, that they have a lovely family and they don't know, they go boating. But I hear that from them. And they talk about this work-life balance as if I don't get that really in my life. I just think, what's the difference? Why is work not life? Why is life not work? Why? I don't get that. There are a lot of things, a lot of these sort of phrases that get to me. There's like, oh, you only live once. I hear that. Oh, well, who said? I said, you might, but I don't know. 20-year-old talking about their bucket list, for instance. Oh, I've got to do this on my bucket list, you know. These are terms that they're in parlance that are funny, really, aren't they? You know, they
they're like slogans that we've kind of embedded slogans in the public sort of lexicon that, you know, we're almost like we're expected to kind of like, it's almost like talking about the weather, you know, like it's like, well, this is just the way it is. And so the more people repeat them, the more they start to believe them. And I think we've kind of got to jostle and crack ourselves out of that sort of hardened, calcified sort of state of thinking. And I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, like I'm doing what I'm doing is because I can't take it seriously anymore, because it's just like, you know, I got a bit angry about it, but now I'm like going, man, you know, this is if you don't laugh, man, you're doomed, I think. And well, that's just my take on it anyway. Like, you know, I'm probably coming back, and I'm cool with that. Yeah, and I'll just laugh as much as I can.
Yeah, it's crazy to fear death in that way, and I think the media have basically shown us a violent side of death, that death equals violence, where from my experience over the years, death for so many people is going to sleep. And it's no really different. Even when we go to sleep every night, we've got no guarantee we're going to wake up in the morning, do we? We actually have to let go of that fear to fall asleep. And we can't remember when we fell asleep, you know, and if you wake up at night and try to get back to sleep, it's the last thing to do. So every night we have a little death, and we escape these dimensions, and we and we dream, you know, in a way that we can fly, and we don't have a time schedule, and it can be frightening. So that gives us a hint about about other dimensions, that we have to spend 8 hours a day in these other dimensions. And I always say to people about sleep, you know, even if you're a mosquito that's here for 5 days, you spend half the time asleep, which is interesting. If I was here for 5 days, you'd want to be partying, wouldn't you? You know, hey, get on to it. But why is that? I've asked many people that, you know, biologists, and they can't really answer. And so we need rest from these dimensions to function in these dimensions. And is death just one big sleep where we wake up again somewhere?
Yeah. That the whole thing about death. I mean, you know, somebody asked me once, you know, would I like to know my time and date of birth, or sorry, my death, you know, the death clock thing, and I was like, going, no, that'd be a distraction. But then I found a really great article about a tribe, I think a tribe in Africa, who know when they're going to die. It's a process they go through. And when they know when they're going to die, they know, you know, they're just going to pack their whole lives full of as much joy and fun and humor. And then somebody gets up dressed up as their death deity, and death deity's dancing all over the table, and they're all just making fun of it. They're going, ha ha ha, yeah, whatever, you know, we know we're going to die, but that's no big deal. So it's funny, like you know, all these different ways of looking at it. But I think that with you're right, you know, with I'm trying to find a phrase here, but I think that death is, I mean, if you watch, death is, it's not what we think it is, and we won't really know until we get there. And I've been in a hospice situation with someone, and it was pretty hard, I have to say. But it was so mind-opening, liberating in a sense too. But I mean, I wasn't there when the person died, but it's the first time I've seen a cadaver, a person who's the vessel of the person who's passed on. And yeah, I mean, obviously this is not something new for you, but I mean, these new experiences, I've taken so much value because from them, in the sense that it's a new experience that I've been able to contemplate upon and learn things about myself, because you don't really know yourself. You can say, well, if I was put in that situation, this is how I would react. Bullshit. I would say that you put yourself in that situation and then you'll see how you react, and I found that to be really great because, rather than just, have the hubris to think that I know exactly myself, it's like, I have a much more playful attitude to life now, and that's served me so well. If anything, over the last bunch of years, it's one thing I've taken on in great stock is it's like, Phil, it's cool, man. Just, let's just try it out and see what happens.
Yeah, I absolutely. It's interesting, though, the fear of death has been a great manipulator. It's actually, and we're seeing that at the moment. We're seeing the fear of death as being as a thing that can somehow galvanize everybody together. And of course, it should be done for compassionate reasons. We don't want elder people or frontline workers to die. That's absolutely fine. But it's actually worked on our own fears and our own fears. I think it's interesting. I'm interested in ancient civilizations and monuments, and from Stonehenge to the Giza pyramids to Serpent Mount, reading Graham Hancock and others who write about this. It would just see it, because we thought, well, if in fact, how did they get people to build these? If say they were people and not aliens, and not using just sound waves, and all that's very interesting. But you'll see that most of these are somehow aligned to the heavens. Okay, you could say that one description of Stonehenge is they were acupuncture the earth. So you were joining the earth to the heavens, and this was a circle where you're connecting, the earth with, and which is what I think we are as well. But anyway, but also in Serpent Mound, which is this in America, it is aligned to certain star clusters, a lot of them to Pleiades. And so I think they were said, look, work on this, pour all this heavy stuff, do it all your life. You may not achieve it, but pass it on. But the reward you're going to get is everlasting life, because you're part of this. You built this, therefore this is where you're going to go. And I thought that makes a lot of sense, because they'll say, how did they motivate that? Now, so they're motivating probably in a slightly more positive way than we're doing at the moment. They were saying, well, you do this and you get your ticket into the afterlife. And that makes sense, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, that's my insurance. That's my health, my life insurance that I'm paying. Because how do they, and so I understand that. So it's actually, but it's a bit different at the moment, because it's about not an understanding that could be a possibility, that when you're gone, you're gone. And that the idea of AI transhumanism is that our mortality goes, that we become immortal. And that, there are even those people who say that our avatar buries our body and their avatar lives on. And in fact, probably your Facebook page does live on, doesn't it, forever? And you've got your digital imaging and everything. And I wonder if this is a projection of those people who are running it, who have their billions, but are actually very fearful of dying. And from my observation, those who are so attached to materialism in this life struggle with dying, because they feel it's all ending. They're too attached to that side. And I wonder if it's not being driven by a few who are addicted to power and are projecting that onto the rest of us.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting, because I'm totally on board with that conversation. I mean, we probably don't have the time to go into any great depth here, but when we start talking about, if we use the probably the more public friendly words of like black magicians, people working, they're basically, living in an inverted sort of form of spirituality. And if we look at the, the various symbols that have been changed to represent, that they use to represent them, they're not creative. They invert things. And one thing they don't like is that they think that, life is a prison. And so they want to do everything to invert that. And so that they want to live on. They don't want to be subject to things. They don't want to be told how to live, and what the things are. And so, they're gathering all this karma, I guess, or how we want to frame it. And so that's going to be all answerable. Natural law says that there will be a reconciling. There are accountants, so to speak, that come and sort these things out eventually. And these people don't want to die because they're enjoying the what some might call the ego run amok, where but they want the society reflect that, because in a way, if because you can pass on, if you have people who are just blindly following the instructions like order followers, and this is, like I said, we don't really got time to go into this in great detail, but they can pass on the brunt of the karmic sort of response by getting other people to fulfill those sorts of things. And so they can live pretty, because they know they've kind of like talked these other people into carrying out their dirty deeds or their deeds, whatever. And so they don't have to wear the they're less morally culpable, or they're not, so yeah, that's right. And so I see that, because I see what's being how we're driven. We're being driven by our drivers. The media uses our emotions as our drivers, getting us to make decisions that we would not otherwise make. That's what marketing is, essentially. It's like getting us to make purchasing decisions we would not otherwise likely make. Buy
stuff we don't need.
We don't need.
and we realize soon after, so we have to get another one.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it's
and that's it, and it's rising above that. I mean, it's almost like it's resonating with a more primitive part of our brain to get us to make decisions on certain things. And I think that's partly why we see a lot of what we do see in the world, is because people are kind of trapped by these base desires and base pleasures, and thinking that's it. I remember working somewhere and they said, "Oh, bro, do you want to come out for a drink?" And I was like, "Well, I don't drink." "Well, what do you do then?" And I'm like going, "What, you think that's all that there is?" I'm like, and I had to ask the person. They're like, "Well, that's just what we do." And that's not me. And they're really curious. Well, what do you do then? I said, "Well, I like to read, and I like to walk, and I like to paint, and I like to inform myself, and those sorts of things." Like, bro, that's interesting. I never would have thought of that. But
it's all about doing and thinking rather than being and feeling, isn't it? It's sort of, you're talking about you're doing, but you're actually feeling and being, as well as doing. That's what you're doing. They're doing stuff. They're not being. They're human. They're being human doings. No, wait a minute. They're doing human doings.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know if I do. I think that's one of the great discoveries I've come across is like studying the Eastern and the Western sort of mystery schools, is that I almost look at the Western world as being the do, and the Eastern world as being the be. And here in New Zealand, we know the East is the West and the West is the East to us. But I think here we're interested. It's interesting because we're in a place where we can find a way to integrate and reconcile these. Well, not reconcile them. That's almost like trying to find a solid answer, but find a way to make them work. And paradoxically, they kind of do work with each other, but I think going in and then going out, rather than just staying on the inside. But anyway, sorry, Robin, I don't want to take up the time with me talking, because this is
No, exactly right. It's as to quote Frank Sinatra, "Doobie doobie doo." It's which is yin and yang, because this is the basis of the Eastern and Chinese philosophy, and the yin yang. So we do need to do, because we're here to do. We are physical doers, but we're also here to be and to create. So that's the yin side, and that's in balance. I mean, I'm not saying that's all retreat. That's all go into our 40 days and 40 nights and stay in the desert, because we're not. We're most of us are here to do something, to connect, but every now and again, if we've got too much doing, we need that retreat, and from what you were saying, I think that's been your life. And I think it's when we retreat in a big way, and I mentioned this before off air, that I think we're retreating also for our ancestors, our family who have passed, who haven't had the chance to retreat. So we're because we inherit, as you know, the unresolved trauma and joy of previous generations. They may have not had that time to do that. And just thinking about it now, it may be the positive move that's happening out of us not having to work so much if AI is taking the jobs, is maybe we're going to go to retreat and have a catharsis for millennia of trauma that we've had. The problem I have is that we said this about computers 30 years ago. It's going to be great. Computers are going to do everything. We're not going to be as busy. And so now I see all the IT people rushing around, busier than ever and more distracted. It's because the human condition hasn't allowed ourselves. We're addicted to the busyness. So maybe something else will happen. Maybe that a certain number of people will go through what you're doing, and this is a renaissance of Phil. I can see it, and it doesn't mean it's comfortable. There's a renaissance, and I see that, and I think to be positive about everything, about the future that seemed to be dictated to us, is that if they're on the wrong track to manipulate us and convert us into this mindset, they're going to be wrong. From my experience, they're going to be wrong. It's going to backfire on them because it's a projection of their own problems. And in return, there's the more and more people will become creative souls and will know and put the advancement in technology, which is part of our conscious development. There's no doubt about it. It is there. It is there. It is not the enemy. If it's put into context, it's going to be amazing. We can do things like this, for instance. But we have to, if we don't understand our own humanity, our own humanness, it can take over. If we do understand that, it can be put into context and we can do good with it. That's my view, because it's not about being a Luddite in the way that is being projected, that somehow we're in denial about the wonders of technology. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But we see the dangers in it unless we understand. First, we have to understand ourselves before we can understand the computers.
That's a really good. I mean, that's been my adventure as well. Is like, that's that retreating within the self and going into the quiet place and listening to the thoughts that just pop up and going, is that really true? I mean, and challenging yourself and going, is that legitimate? And then, do I actually possess the wisdom right now, or the knowledge even and the understanding to make a decision on that? And so, once I started reading, I mean, that's been one of the greatest things of this last sort of 6 or 7 years. It's been like discovering, I have a great joy for reading. I really enjoy reading the occult and reading about the ancient esoteric systems. And in fact, I've had some experiences that I'm still, working through, and I've got some friends that can do some pretty interesting things that would seem otherwise impossible. And I've had experiences with my Reiki clients that are like, what? And I've gone down the skeptics route, and I've looked at what the skeptics have to say, and I have to say that for the large part, it's pretty flimsy. It's like they've got a confirmation bias, and they're not really coming at it. They're more like mathematicians saying, well, this can't be real because it doesn't add up. I can't put this in a test tube or a calculator, sort of thing. And so for me, I guess I'm finding my real joy is exploring these human potentials and capabilities, where where can we go not just biologically, because that's not the right word, but inherently, rather than this sort of like you said, we're heading towards this technocratic kind of engineered based sort of like thing where everything's going to be organized and quantized, and and you're over here and you like this, that, and the other thing, and we want everything to add up, and so everything can be managed at a very small level throughout all areas of your life. And I'm like, no, I'm not buying that, and I get a choice in this. And I guess that's been part of this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like in Huxley's Brave New World, where everybody has the blue pill, which is not the red pill, but the soma. I think it's called it soma, isn't it? Where they all float and have this sort of sanitized life that is supposed to be easy, but it lacks it lacks grit. It lacks everything, because in that world, in Huxley's world, the Brave New World, they banned Shakespeare, they banned the Bible because it's too yucky, and they banned childbirth because it's too yucky. So they're trying to ban these challenges, and what we have been said as the negative side of life, the struggles, which actually contribute to our art, I think, but it also makes us human and interesting. When people talk about artificial intelligence and the Great Reset, which is apparently being planned to us by the World Economic Forum and all these guys, and I say, well, look at the word AI. There's a hint in that, isn't there? It's called artificial. It's not intelligence. It's artificial. And where do they talk about compassion and love? What are they're somehow grasping for something in the future which they don't have in the present, and it's a hunch. It's based on a hunch, and it can be produced very, very seductively with wonderful movies. And there's a series of AI fronted by Robert Downey Jr. that's been produced by Google and YouTube, and it's very seductive. It's beautifully done, and you can see why it will appeal to people who feel this life is empty and boring, and their avatar can be really whoever they want it to be. But if you actually touch on the fact how amazing your potential is without all that, it leaves that for dead. And I think that's your work now, and it's my work to infuse those insights into as many people as possible, particularly to younger people who are going to be manipulated into this sense that they are not going to be whole without this control on them. So our focus must be on that generation and that are coming through, to instill them with their own sort of creative geniuses.
That's awesome. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm just watching the time there. I know that you're on a bit of a short time schedule, so I think that's a really great place probably for us to close things off for the watchers there. If I could just get you to stick around for just a couple of minutes just after. So thank you so much, Dr. Robin Kelly, for your time. I know you're a very busy man, especially right now. This has been a wonderful chat, and maybe we can hook up again in the future and have another chat, because I mean, there's so much to talk about, isn't there? And we cross so many. We dipped the toe in so many different pools here today, we could probably go into a lot of things a lot deeper. But I'm very grateful for your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it, Phil, and well done with what you're doing. Keep at it, and it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. It's connecting with people, having conversations like this, and sharing them with people, and just not everyone digs it, but that's cool. I'm cool with that. But anyway, okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for all the watchers and the viewers and the all you wonderful people out there. I'm really really grateful for your support, and we'll see you guys on the next broadcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.